So if you watched our first episode of season 2, I talked a little bit about where we have been and that we just recently acquired 2 new branches, one in New Holland, Ohio, and one in Mount Sterling, Ohio. So one of the topics we wanted to talk to you guys about was mergers and acquisitions. So we want to give you several takes on what this is like and what you can expect because, every one is going to be different. But we happen to have someone on staff now that went through it. So I am here with Lonnie Hunt. How are you, Lonnie?
I'm great. About yourself?
I'm doing well. So when you heard me talk about those awesome employees that we took on, Lonnie happens to be one of them. So obviously, we're here to talk about mergers and acquisitions. And the reason we asked you to do this is because you've been through a couple, right?
Yes, I have. Yes.
So other than the one that you obviously just went through to be a part of our team, so let's just start at the beginning. What is that initial emotion like when you find out that your company is going to be changing?
Well, first of all, this goes way back early years of my banking, late 70s, 80s. It was my first experience. It was much different back then than what it is now. Back then, it wasn't electronic, no debits, no card, all that. So the transition was pretty easy. Basically, it's a name change, but with the new way, you've got ABA routing numbers, affects everybody's direct deposits, debits on insurance companies, and if they fail to change those, that's where the problems come in on a lot of the transitions. But back in the 80s, it was very easy. There was really not a whole lot of issues when you had to transfer that way from one bank to the other. But this one here, just like any other bank, there's always some downfalls to it, but within a week or two after it takes place, it starts smoothing out.
Right. So how, in your career, which you've been in banking for how many years? 40?
July be 44.
44 years. That's a long time.
Yes, it is. Yes.
You're doing something right if you've been in the same business for 44 years.
A long time.
Props there. So I guess just first off, how many have you actually been through in your career?
5.
Right. So we talked a little before this, and one of them were 3 in 1 year. Is that what you said?
Yes, that's correct.
So take me through that.
Okay.
Because that is...
1985 is the year that I worked for a company that the home state savings crisis took place, and it was a finance company, and during that time, everybody had to downsize, and you had to be at a certain number to be able to continue business. So they downsized, closed an office that I was in. I had an opportunity to go with another company, and that was in 1985. And while I was in Florence, Kentucky training, I got a phone call stating that they had acquired another company also that's going to be housed out in my office. So before I even hit my office, I had 2 companies I was responsible for. So I had payroll for one, payroll for the other company, phone call, you answer one way, the other way. Then probably within 6 months, we combined those 2 together and became one company. As things started smoothing out, I got to notice that company sold to another one. So within 3 changes in 1 year, it was just a nightmare. But the thing again, there was no debit cards, there was no electronic web banking. So the transition was pretty easy. People just had to change the name on the checks when they made the payments. So it wasn't that bad then. But this time it'd be really troublesome for the customers because of all the technology we had to go through.
Right. And I think we should note that you guys in Mount Sterling, New Holland didn't just go through the acquisition with us. It was 2 years ago you went through an additional,
right.
And then you went with North Valley.
Yep.
So what is that like for a staff? Because you had, your role obviously, you've been promoted and it's changed since you've been in North Valley, but you had a staff at that time when we actually acquired that office.
Right.
What are the emotions like in the office when you find out about that?
The day that we heard about this, we got a message said we had a mandatory meeting. It was on a Wednesday. I kind of thought something that was going to be happening, and when I seen everybody coming in that Wednesday evening, I knew what was taking place. But the uncertainty of a merger, you don't know what's going to happen, if you're going to have your job, you don't know if your job's going to change, your payroll is going to change. There's a lot of uncertainty, but with North Valley Bank coming in, talking to them, I had told the ladies at the office, I said, it's going to be good because it felt like this bank kind of has the old ways of banking, which they do. They look at things totally different than the big banks do. So, and overall, that part of the merger wasn't bad at all. Everybody felt at ease, and the day of December 9th, we walk in, and that's like, okay, new computers, new phones. But once you learn that, within, again, a couple weeks, we started fitting right in. So it wasn't that bad.
Right. So I've only been through this one time in my career, and it was when I was with Unison, which was purchased by Huntington. So we went from being a local bank to a giant bank. And I remember the training and how difficult that was. And my situation there was a little bit different because we went through training and then we didn't actually start utilizing the systems for, maybe a month later. So by the time we actually started using them, everyone had forgotten what the training was. But I feel like training would probably be one of the hardest parts of that.
Right.
So how, as a leader of that team, do you deal with, keeping tensions down and trying to keep everybody grounded? Because, I would think going through what some of your staff at the time went through, it would be pretty easy to think, I'm finding a new job because I'm not going to deal with this again.
Right.
So how do you deal with that as a leader?
Well, I guess North Valley, them being on site, and then our company that does the programming on site, they were there to answer a lot of questions. So if we had a stumble, they were there. And I think there's ongoing, after they leave the office, you still have a problem with their phone call away. So the tension and frustration of the customers, not the customer, back up, the employees, it's going to happen. But once they get the answer of what they're having a problem with, it calms down.
Right. So if there is somebody that's going to be going through an acquisition or a merger soon, even if it's not in banking, what would your advice be to them as a person in management?
I guess the thing is, it's all about training. Take notes, what you can. My side, I didn't take a lot of notes because mine was pretty much in the loans, the commercials, and I understand those. I just got to read the policy to sort mine out. On the deposit side, there's a lot to learn there, and I think if you just take notes, do the webinars if they're available, just basically pay attention.
Right. And I know one thing that I wish I would have done the many, many years ago that I went through my acquisition was ask questions. I wish I would have done that back then because I think it would have made things a little bit easier. So if somebody's going through a merger or acquisition, my biggest advice would be don't be afraid to ask questions.
Oh, most definitely.
Because things are going to be so different.
Right.
Even in banking, when you go from one bank to another, you would think generally things would be similar. Not at all. Things are so different. So, and I am sure I've gotten to visit the new offices a few times since the acquisition happened, and I know tensions were high for a while, but I hope things are getting better.
They are.
I hope
so. Well, I guess one thing that helped us too when we had the meeting up front, all staff, Jim Nicholson was there, basically assuring everybody that their jobs was good, their positions. The comfort level at that point in time, it was easy because nobody was going to lose their jobs, and the salary stayed the same benefits. So if you have any company that's going to go through a merger, that would be the thing you really got to calm down is the uncertainty. Yeah. And every time there's something like that coming down, that a lot of these big banks, they buy the portfolio, the assets of the bank, but they don't really need the employees because they got a branch someplace else that they can, and they cut employees. So I think in the upper management that's buying a company needs to reassure the employees that they're safe and nothing's going to change. And that's what helped us.
Right. Have you ever been through one of the acquisitions where you were unsure if you were going to have your position?
No, I've been pretty lucky there.
That's good.
Yep.
That would be so scary to not know if you're going to have your income.
Yeah. My wife went through one, and she did lose her job. 32 years in the office. And
32
and that was
years?
Another bank, yes.
Oh, that's horrible.
So it does happen, but just, it's what they are intending to do with that office. If they want to keep it open or if they want to combine the portfolio to another branch, then they buy it just basically for the numbers, not the employees.
Right.
And that's what happened with her case.
That's disappointing,
it
especially
is.
after being with the company for that long. That's not something you want to hear about.
No, not at all.
Ugh, that would be rough. Yep. So I guess my next question will be, I'm guessing you've seen some different outcomes in the mergers and acquisitions that you've been through. What would be a best case scenario for someone who's going through this, maybe not even in banking? What would you say the best case scenario could be for them?
As an employee? That's a tough question, but I would say if they're wanting to stay on and grow, they need to learn and prove themselves that they're grasping it and take that leadership role and try to help others, and maybe that will help them in advancement. But other than that, I'm not sure how to answer that.
It would be difficult,
It is,
especially
yeah.
I guess every circumstance would be a little bit different.
Right.
But I think mergers and acquisitions are difficult. I think they're difficult.
They are.
And even, I mean, for North Valley, behind the scenes, the work that we had to do leading up to it was a lot, especially for our deposit operations team. I mean,
Right.
they were here all the time.
What really kind of compounded our problem in this merger, the previous bank acquired another bank, which the name went away. So we was able to use their ABA routing number, and we didn't have to change that. And then when the previous bank bought them, that name also went away. So when North Valley took over, there was 3 ABA routing numbers out there, the new one and the other 2. So when the customer called Social Security to change their direct deposit, they would ask, what's your routing number? And they thought they had the previous bank, but it was actually the first bank. So some of the transfers was difficult, and that's kind of rare. That don't usually happen that way. Mm-hmm. So we had some difficulty with that, and it's all just a bookkeeping of which routing number they were using. And so by the bank going away, we were able to use that number and not have to change a lot on the paperwork. So yeah, so that's rare that would happen that way.
Right. Yep. And then North Valley came along and
Yes.
that changed.
Right.
Sorry about that.
Right.
One thing I know I would always say that, I mean, one thing that I definitely learned through this acquisition was you can plan as much as you want, but when you have to rely on third-party companies to do their part and do their part correctly and in a timely manner, that can throw a wrench in things.
Oh, yeah.
Because we had, I would say myself and Amy Froelich, the head of our deposit operations department, had things planned out to a T. I mean, perfection. But then when you rely on a third-party company to help you with mailing lists or printing or things like that, things don't go the way you plan.
No.
And if you're someone like me, you don't like when things don't go according
That's
to
correct,
plan.
yeah.
So I guess that would be some advice I would give anyone going through a merger or acquisition. And even if it's not banking, you really got to stay on your third-party companies to make sure they're doing their part. Because, I mean, we had to rely on them for a lot of things for this. And so, I mean, sometimes it was fantastic, and sometimes it just was disappointing.
I'm just trying to sort of extract for people who are watching that aren't necessarily in banking, like what are the sort of the key takeaways from your experience merging a number of times? And I think you've talked about it, but I guess can you really pinpoint, is there a mindset? And one of the reasons I ask is you seem to have been successful in all of them.
Right.
You know, you've kept your job, which attests to the fact that you sort of seamlessly fit in and did that well. And I know just from talking to people around the bank here that they're really pleased with the way you've really hit the ground running. And so there's definitely sort of a mindset and an attitude that you have that has been very helpful for you. And maybe you can talk just a little bit about that. You hinted at it a little bit, but maybe a little more specific about how you've sort of, from your perspective, approached either emerging, taking over, or being taken over, and obviously North Valley stepping in and saying, hey, your job's safe helps a lot, but how you just sort of approach that with a particular mindset, whether it's open mind or however you want to describe that, if you just talk about that.
Well, I think with North Valley, I was keyed up going in because I don't think I could be working with a better person, Jim Bamel.
Yeah, you got your boss.
Is on top. He's got the personality. He's lively. He's positive. So that got me up and running because I know we work together good, and I took him out on calls with me. But I think if you go in with the wrong attitude that I can't do it, I'm scared of my job, you're going to fail. So this case, I knew I was lining up things and told Jim, when this day comes, we're going to be busy. And I started working it real heavy and still am. But I think that's the whole key. It's a mind focus, be positive. Don't let the negative get down. You got customers coming in, they're going to close. They're upset because they can't, seem to get things correctly. You've got to stay on top of it and be positive. I mean, that's the whole thing. And like I tell the girls in the office, you've got to greet those customers, get them feeling comfortable about the bank again. And because they get down, you get down, it's going to fail. And I think that's just, it's all the mindset. And I knew what I need to do and to make this thing go. Because my job now is growing the bank on the loan side. And that's my goal, and that's what I'm doing. So.
Yeah. That's a great mindset to have. And that's really good advice for anybody who's listening or watching, is to keep that positive mindset. I think the best advice that you gave during this, that I hope people take away from it, is to try to stay positive and to have a plan. So once your acquisition is complete, have a plan of how you're going to, move forward.
Absolutely.
I think that's a really fantastic piece of advice. And to have patience. Well, Lonnie, thank you for sitting down with us today. I know this is a little bit of a touchy subject for you since you just went through it again with us, but we appreciate you giving some insight as an expert and someone who's been through it 5 times. So hopefully you're done.
I hope so. I hope so.
If we have it our way, you're done.
Okay,
so,
good.
So I appreciate you sitting down with us. For those of you listening or watching, we're going to be talking about a lot of different aspects about mergers and acquisitions because it's something important to companies. So we're definitely going to be checking out different angles of mergers and acquisitions. So stay tuned, and we'll just see you next week.